Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever you are. My name is Jay Ignorant. Welcome back to another Soul Podcast episode, aka Student of Life, aka SOL. I hope you are all doing well. Now why don't we just go ahead and jump right into it. So the topic of today is the devil you know, the familiarity trap. Now today is a two-part, this is a part one in terms of the topic. And so the first part is the anti-growth environment. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. I refer to the devil you know as the familiarity trap for one simple reason. We choose to deal with the devil we are familiar with instead of facing the unknown. Inside the unknown is virtually everything on the outside of our scope of understanding. For some of us, dealing with something that we don't yet know how to handle or the mere idea of it can be so scary that we allow that fear to keep us in stagnation. And staying in this place, whether it be a physical location or a mindset, where we are accustomed to the flow and etiquette, we feel like we know what to expect. In other words, we feel safe. The issue is that if we never make any attempt to try something new, we aren't allowing ourselves to be challenged. We need challenges as ever-growing beings because growth lies in that sweet spot between a problem and a solution. You grow when your perspective has been shifted for the better because you've learned to do better. And staying in the same place, then most things about us also stay the same. So when we're talking about the anti-growth environment, the anti-growth environment is one which encourages the opposing, comfort and or stagnation. So it's an environment that encourages anything that is not growth, or that is opposing growth actually. So there's nothing wrong with choosing comfort. Nothing wrong with that. Yet it's about being aware that we're choosing comfort over the growth. So let's talk about why. Let's talk more about why it's so important. Awareness of what we're choosing is what empowers us to make different decisions. We usually choose comfort over growth because of an avoidance to the fear of the unknown, like we just stated in the free right. But inside the unknown is what some people fear because, how do we say this? Some people fear the place of possibility, i.e. the unknown or the undecided realm. So much so that they would rather just deal with whatever qualms or issues that they may have in a situation instead of trying something new that they have no certainty of. And it's the lack of certainty. It's that idea of what if. That really is what keeps us trapped the majority of the time. And it is in doing this that we allow the comfort of the familiarity trap to keep us in stagnation. So now that we know this, what do we do about it? You must get yourself out of that environment. Now, keep in mind, again, that the environment could be anything that brings you a feeling of safety or comfort. And that's important, it's anything that brings you a feeling of safety and or comfort and is being used to keep you still in that set place. So again, physical location, this could be a mindset, this could be a habit, it could be a group of friends. The anti-growth environment is virtually anything. So let's try not to put this in a box of just a specific place. Now, it works by keeping you in a place where you know what to expect. In theory, if you do the opposite, where you may excuse me. So, in theory, if being in this anti-growth environment works by keeping us in a place of stagnation because we know what to expect, in theory, if you do the opposite, you may receive the opposing result, i.e. movement instead of stagnation. So do something that gets you out of your comfort zone. So And I did have like a list of steps. This doesn't apply for everything, but it is very general and it applies for most things. So find out what scares you the most regarding making said changes. What is the fear of? We all know it's the fear of the unknown, but it's what if this happens? What if that happens? That's the uncertainty. What is the what if that keeps you in that box? That is what you want to identify. And then the next question you want to ask yourself is, where do these fears even come from? And are they actually logical? And I know that we talked about in reprogramming, and actually multiple of our last episodes in this season, we talked about how throughout our childhood there's so many ideas and perspectives instilled within us that we just kind of run on autopilot still believing them. And fear is definitely one of those things. We inherit a lot of the fears of our parents, like the fear of being broke or the fear of leaving your hometown. These are very real, even though the symptoms of them are real, even though we don't actually have a reason for feeling this way ourselves. So it's really important to ask yourself, where does the fear come from and is it logical? And the next question is, even if my fears were realized, as in if they actually came to reality and I saw them before me, what is the worst thing that can happen? And I really feel like this helps put it into perspective of being logical. Is my fear really something to be afraid of? Could this benefit me in some way? So that is another question you want to ask yourself. And the next question, and the last question I have for you, when you are faced with a situation is, if the change works, what's the best outcome? So yes, I definitely think it's great to try to start out with a goal, but the real thing that you're trying to assess is the risk of my worst fear actually greater than the potential for this change working out in my favor? I'm going to read that again for you. Is the risk of my worst fear actually greater than the potential for this change working out in my favor? So when it comes to taking risks, I definitely believe in taking calculated risks. I am still working on it. Still working on it for sure. However, I definitely want to hammer in the idea that as long as you stay doing the same thing because you are comfortable, you will never get to where you want to be unless you are already where you want to be. So I feel like that last question really, really hammers in whether or not the fear is beneficial. Because mind you, a fear of falling off of a cliff, that is beneficial. That keeps you alive. But the fear of, getting your heart broken may not be as beneficial, because you might try to keep yourself away from other people or away from the lovers who could actually make your life better or show you a new, I don't know why I just heard A Whole New World from the Aladdin soundtrack, but yes, they could show you a whole new way of existing and you never would know if you don't take the shot. So again, is the risk of my worst fear actually greater than the potential for this change working out in my favor? So all of the questions that I listed out should help you answer that final question. So I know how hilarious this is going to sound, but for the longest time I had a fear of putting myself out there on social media. So funny. It's so funny because I realized I'm not afraid of a camera. I was never really, I don't think the camera is what scares me really. But the idea that there's going to be an image of me posted up somewhere that anybody could see at any given point in time and just the peanut gallery could go wild, that frightened me. It made me feel as if I had no control after I put something out, which realistically, you don't. You don't. Once you post something anywhere on social media or anywhere on the internet, you are now subject to whatever ridicule it might come across. So for a long time, it really frightened me. It did. And I find it really interesting because, well, now I am on my second season of a podcast. It's ironic, really. It is. And I modeled for a while. I have taken pictures and posted my own pictures. There's so many things that were kind of like baby steps that I had to go through to get to this level. In the last episode or the episode before, I don't quite remember, I did state that, what did I say? Oh, for about 10 years, I wanted to do something on the internet. I remember when Vine was super popular, and I remember watching Quinta and David So and JK News, and I was like, I could do that. Or maybe not something specifically like that, but I could do my own thing. And I remember, this was before I graduated high school, and I don't know, where I came from, it just wasn't, I don't want to say it wasn't encouraged, but the idea was, you, I don't want to say this, but yeah, you join the Army, or you join the Marines, you join the Navy, you join one of them, or you find a job, you get pregnant, have some babies, there was very set, you could be a doctor, you could be a nurse, you could go to college, but that was the set roles kind of laid out for me, and I feel like there wasn't really anyone around me that was breaking out of that. So I kind of was just like, oh, it's just me in my head. It's kind of like one of those things where you see celebrities in Hollywood and you're like, oh, that's one of them kind of thing. That's a Hollywood thing. That's not for everyday people. But now we can see it is for everybody. We are all out here. And it took me, I don't want to say it took me a long time, but it did. But the reality is time is irrelevant in this aspect. It took me having to baby step my way out of it. I remember the first time I made an Instagram, I would post things and literally the next day I would delete them. Or I would archive things from my Facebook every month just because I was so self-conscious. Now, I did grow up in an age where there was social media, so it's not I grew up when everyone had a Facebook and everyone had an Instagram by the time I was in high school, and it wasn't, how do I say this? It was new, but it wasn't uncommon to have a social media. Yet I myself was still so afraid to put myself out there. Because I actually can't give you a reason why. It was new. It was new. It was outside of my comfort zone. Now, mind you, I wasn't necessarily too afraid of speaking to people one-on-one, face-to-face. That was not my problem. Not at all, actually. So I used to wonder what is actually wrong with me where I can have these interactions on the day-to-day. However, when it comes to sitting in front of the camera and then posting that, I struggled so much. And I didn't get it for a long time until something happened. I almost said I ran away. I moved from home and I lived in the Bay Area for a while. And I remember I was like, I'm going to be a model. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do this. And I found a few photographers, but one of my favorites, Victor, shout out to Victor, he asked me to do something crazy. Which was crazy to me. And I did it. And to this day, I don't regret it. I know that there were people who would probably find it and be like, oh, how could you disgrace yourself like that? That's forever out there on the internet now. But every time I see these pictures, I look at them and all I can think of was, wow, I was so brave. I was so brave. In my mind at that time, I thought of myself as in a lot of things, actually. But when I look back on it, I was like, wow, I have always been a true artist down to my core. And it was actually after that where I fell in love with photography. And I started taking pictures of so many things. Like, I love flowers, I love birds, landscapes, but it opened up a door for me. And I didn't just go from, okay, I'm gonna model and now I'm gonna start a podcast, and it wasn't like that, not at all. I felt like there was definitely more of an evolution where I had to find my calling, as cliche as that sounds. I had to find, like, what am I actually gonna talk about? Like, what am I posting? What's the point of me being here in front of these people, whether that be hundreds, thousands, or millions? Like, what's the point of it? And I had to sit down and find that. And actually, it wasn't sit down. I had to live and find that. And it was a while before I conjoined the two things. Mind you, making videos and posting pictures, again, that was another hurdle. That was another huge leap for me, because it's one thing to pose. You know, I could pose for you, whatever you want, like, that's fine. Whatever I want to do, whatever I want to present, that's fine. Yet when it comes to presenting my ideas and my thoughts and things of that nature, then it's so much more closer to home. So much more closer to home. And I feel like once I was able to agree with myself, like, hey, this is good for you, and this is actually good for the people that may watch it, then I don't want to say I was able to take myself out of the equation, but I was able to look at it more big picture. Now, yes, again, I do feel called to do what I'm doing now, which is why I'm doing it. But again, there was a whole lot of back and forth. If you've watched any of my prior YouTube videos, one of my first YouTube videos, you see I started out by talking about coding boot camps, because that's what I knew. I had interviewed for about 4 or 5 coding boot camps. I had been trying to learn to code for years on my own, and I just had a struggle with trying to balance everyday life, you know, going to school, going to work, and trying to learn to code. And I was trying to run a bit. Let's put that down. That's not the topic of the day. But if you go back, you'll see that I was giving advice, but I was giving a specific niche of advice is what I was giving out to the world, because that's what I thought was practical. That's what I could provide, and that's what I was comfortable with. So even though I went from, okay, I'm afraid of social media in general, to I'm going to be a model, to, okay, now I will start posting videos, the videos were I still kept myself in a box, because I only spoke about things that I felt comfortable speaking about, things that I knew, things that I had, things that I knew myself. So going from that to life advice, God really did a number on me. God really did a number on me, because I had to sit down, look myself in the mirror, and decide, okay, everything that I put inside of my podcast, I have spoken to people every single time. And there are those times where you give advice to people, and sometimes they take it, sometimes they don't. And when they don't, they come back and complain about the same problem, and you try to give them different advice. Sometimes they take it, sometimes they don't. And when they don't, they come back and complain. You know, it's just a cycle. And as much as I felt like I was benefiting those around me, I didn't feel like I was, how do I say this? This is going to sound crazy, but I felt more like a punching bag more than I was actually helping the people. It felt like they were just kind of dumping whatever they had on me, and I was giving advice, and whatever advice I gave made them feel better, but it wasn't enough to make them want to do differently. And something happened within me where I decided I want to make a difference. I want people to hear my advice and want to be different, and hopefully it helps them to do so. And I sat there and I thought, okay, I could write a book, I could do all these things, but one of the best ways in 2024 is to put yourself out there. And again, God did a number on me, and I sat down for a whole month. I stopped coding. I wasn't working. I was fasting a lot. I was in the trenches. Like, me and God were going back and forth. Like, he was looking at me like, what you gonna do? And I'm looking at him like, well, what do you want me to do? And he's like, well, I told you what to do. And I'm sitting there like, but I don't want to do that. received all the signs, all the messages, even within myself, I made the conscious decision, this is what I want to do, but I'm scared. I am afraid. God, what if they judge me? And I felt myself on the inside, like, respond, like, who gives a fuck? Who cares? If people judge you, let them. And on the flip side, for those who you are benefiting, you are doing more good than harm. Because if someone doesn't agree, that's fine. That's fine. People don't have to agree with me. And I feel like that's the beauty of what I'm doing, of the advice. Take it with a grain of salt or don't take it at all. And what is the phrase? I've been hearing this a lot. What is it? Eat the meat, spit out the bone. Love it. Love it. Eat the meat, spit out the bone. If it's whatever is for you, take that. Run with it. Help, use it. I want you to take my information and use it for yourself. But if it's not for you, go ahead, drop it and keep it pushing. And I feel like I was still struggling with that in the first season. I feel like you can actually tell I was still struggling with that because my information was much more guarded and girded and things of that nature. But now I do feel like I am much more in a state where I can confidently say what I feel like needs to be said in the hopes and the prayers that whoever it is reaching, it is definitely benefiting them. And when it comes to the judgments, I feel like I don't give it as much of a second thought anymore. And actually, I found out that I was growing when I got my first dislike. I posted a YouTube short and I got a dislike, like someone thumbs me down. And I was like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? You could just keep scrolling. It's life advice. But I'm like, oh, wow, that person must not have liked it. And then I sat there, I was like, wait, 11 people liked it, but 1 dislike. So not only for every 11 people, 10 or 11 people that like my content, or I'm sorry, for every 1 person that does not like my content, there's 10 more that do. There's also the fact that I can celebrate because I've gotten to the point to where there are enough people who are viewing my content that there's someone who doesn't like it. And like that means I'm growing in some way, shape, or form. So instead of feeling down and upset about it, I celebrated. I said, baby, we're making it. You know, like I'm getting somewhere. And I feel like each step was me getting out of my comfort zone. And yes, this took years, a good 7 years, but I'm here now. And I want this to be encouragement to whoever's listening. You could be wherever you want to be, whether it be days, months, years, but you got to get out of that comfort zone. And there's nothing wrong with being afraid. Like I said, the fear of falling off of a cliff is what keeps you alive. However, the fear of flying is what keeps you down on the ground. So, again, beware of the devil you know, because it is a familiarity trap. And today's topic was the anti-growth environment. And sometimes you gotta get out. So, thank you for joining me for another Soul podcast episode. I am J.E. Marie. And again, I want to remind y'all, I want to see these emails. I want to see these stories. I want to know what happened for you. What changed for you? If this helped you, let me know. If it didn't, if it sucked, let me know. But more specifically, if you have any life-changing stories or a story that changed your life specifically, I would love to hear it and I would love to share it. And yeah, so go ahead and shoot me an email, and with your consent, I would love to do so. Again, my name is J.E. Marie, and I wish you all the best on your SOL journey. Bye, guys.